Ben Sterling had not spoken to another soul in weeks. He lived alone on a quiet ranch deep in the wild lands of the West. Far from any town, his land stretched wide under a sky that changed from burning blue to soft gold. His home was a small, wooden cabin, his barn old but strong. His days were quiet. Too quiet. He fixed broken fences, fed the cows, and listened to the wind. Once, this place had been full of life. His wife Martha used to sing while cooking. His son Tim had a laugh that echoed through the hills. But the fever took them both, and since then, Ben had lived with only ghosts. The house still smelled of her soap. Tim's boots sat by the door, but the laughter was gone. Ben did not want people. He did not want trouble. All he wanted was peace. But that morning, peace ended. It started with a noise, soft, like the cry of a wounded animal. Ben had just finished feeding the animals when he heard it. He paused, his hand on the barn door. Another sound came, a low groan and then silence. Carefully, Ben opened the door. Inside, light spilled through the cracks in the wood. His boots crunched on dry hay, and then he saw her. At first he only noticed the dark hair, black as night, tangled and wet with sweat. It lay across the straw like ink spilled on gold. Then he saw the red stain, blood, spreading across a worn piece of buckskin. It was a woman, a Comanche woman. Ben froze. His heart jumped hard in his chest. She was young, maybe in her 20s, her skin brown with sun, her face sharp with pain. A makeshift bandage was tied around her side, already soaked through. Her breathing was shallow. Her lips were cracked. One arm twitched, and her eyes fluttered, but did not open. Ben's first thought was simple. Why is she here? His second, she's dying. And then, something deeper stirred inside him. Something he hadn't felt in a long time. Care. He stepped closer, slowly, like approaching a wild horse. The barn smelled of hay and old wood, but under it was the sharp scent of blood and fear. He knelt beside her. Her chest rose and fell like a bird caught in a storm. Her forehead burned with fever when he touched it. Her clothes were torn and dirty. There were old bruises on her arms. Someone had hurt her, badly. Then suddenly her eyes opened. Dark, wide eyes, wild with terror. For a moment they stared at each other, frozen in fear. She tried to move, but her body was too weak. She let out a sound, not a word, just a broken breath. It was the sound of someone who had run too far, fought too hard, and had nothing left. Ben didn't speak. Words felt useless. He simply reached, out again, slower this time, and touched her hand. She didn't pull away, that was enough. He picked her up. She was so light, like lifting a bundle of feathers. Her head fell against his shoulder. Her skin was hot against his chest. Her breath touched his neck. He carried her across the yard and into the cabin. It felt strange having another person in the house again. The small space suddenly felt full, like it had come alive again. He laid her gently on his own bed. He covered her with his only good blanket. Her face was pale. Her wound looked worse up close. Ben worked quickly. He boiled water over the fire, found clean cloth, tore strips from one of his shirts. He cleaned the wound. She flinched but did not cry out. He gave her sips of water. He whispered soft things, not words, just sounds, anything to keep her calm. All night, he stayed by her side. She drifted in and out of sleep, sometimes muttering in her own language. He couldn't understand, but he listened anyway. Once, she cried. Once she smiled. Mostly she just lay still, fighting whatever storm still raged inside her. Ben didn't sleep. He watched the fire, listened to the wind, and thought about Martha, about Tim, about how strange life was, how this woman, this stranger from a world so different from his own, had come into his life like a sudden rain on dry ground. He didn't know her name. He didn't know her story, but he knew she was hurt, alone and afraid, and that was enough. The next morning she was still alive. Her fever had not gotten worse. She was still weak, but her breathing was steadier. Ben made a broth from rabbit and wild onions. He fed her slowly, carefully. She took only a few spoonfuls, but that was more than nothing. Later, she opened her eyes. The days passed slowly, but something inside Ben Sterling was beginning to change. Each morning, the wind still whistled through the grass. The cattle still grazed lazily near the fence. The chores didn't stop. But now, Ben wasn't only feeding the cows or fixing the roof. He was caring for Naru. She stayed in his bed wrapped in blankets. Her face was still pale, her wound deep, but her strength was returning, little by little. Her eyes no longer held only fear. Now, they held questions. Ben didn't speak much. Words were hard for him even before she came. Now, with a language barrier between them, they seemed even more useless. Still, he tried. He would point to things: water, fire, blanket, and say the words slowly. She watched, listened, and sometimes repeated them. Her voice was soft and rough, like dry leaves in wind. She pointed to herself once and said, "Naru." He nodded, remembering. "Naru." She nodded back, then pointed to him. He touched his chest. "Ben." Her lips twitched. A small smile. The first he had seen. That one smile gave him more warmth than any fire. Ben started to leave small things. By her bed. A feather he found near the stream. A stone shaped like a heart. A few ripe berries. He didn't know why he did it. Maybe because he wanted to bring beauty to her life. Or maybe it helped him feel useful again. One afternoon he saw her holding the hawk feather, turning it slowly in her fingers. There was a faraway look in her eyes, as if she were remembering something from long ago. That image stayed with him. Naru began sitting up more. She helped him stir the broth. She folded her blanket. She watched him carefully when he cut wood or fed the chickens, her eyes following every move. Sometimes Ben caught her looking at the family picture that still sat above the hearth. Martha, holding Tim, their faces full of life. Naru never asked, but she knew. There was sadness in Ben, deep sadness. It lived in the lines on his face, in the silence in his eyes. But now there was something else. Naru's presence had brought something back, the feeling of being needed. One evening, as the fire crackled low, Ben stepped outside to check the sky. A storm was coming. He could smell it in the air. He walked out toward the edge of the pasture, his boots crunching on dry grass. That's when he saw them. Tracks. Fresh horse tracks. They didn't belong to his land. He knew every path. And print on this ranch, these were new, sharp, heavy. His heart sank. He followed the trail up the hill just enough to see the ridge. Smoke. Someone had made camp nearby. Riders. Watching. Ben stood still. A chill passed through him. He knew this wasn't a good sign. He returned to the cabin with a hard look on his face. Inside, Naru was sewing a tear in the shirt he had given her. She looked up, eyes sharp. She felt the change in the air. Ben picked up his rifle. He cleaned it slowly, carefully. His hands were steady, but his jaw was tight. Naru watched, silent. Then she spoke, her voice soft and slow. "They are coming." Ben looked up, she nodded. "They hunt me. Bad men, soldiers, but not true soldiers. Killers. They burn my people." Her English was rough, but the meaning was clear. Ben swallowed hard. He should have been afraid, but he wasn't. He was angry, not at her, never at her, but at the world, at the kind of men who hunted a wounded woman across the hills, at the kind of power that crushed the weak without care. "They won't get you," he said. Naru's eyes locked on his. "You stay here," he added. "I'll protect you." That night, Ben didn't sleep. He sat in a chair by the door, rifle across his lap. The fire burned low. The wind howled outside. But inside the cabin there was warmth, not just from the fire, but from something stronger. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. In that silence, a trust was growing, like grass rising through hard ground after a long winter. The next day, Ben rode out early, checking every path, every fence post. He saw more signs. The same horses, the same boot prints. Someone was watching, they hadn't come down yet. Maybe they were waiting, maybe they didn't know for sure. But Ben knew this land. He knew how to see what others missed. And they were there. That afternoon, while Naru rested, he found her blanket, folded neatly, her boots placed by the door. She was quiet, thoughtful, always watching. She was not weak. Not anymore. Later that evening, as the sun fell behind the hills, a strange peace came over the ranch. The cabin glowed with firelight. Naru stirred a pot of beans while Ben sat by the window, sharpening a knife. It felt like they had done this for years. The days felt longer now. Ben Sterling had lived many years under the wide skies of the West, but this was different. He was no longer just a man with cattle and fences. Now, he was a man with a reason to fight. Every morning, he checked the hills. Every evening, he cleaned his rifle. Naru was healing. She walked slowly around the cabin now, helped stir the stew, even smiled when she caught a butterfly by the windowsill. But behind her calm eyes, Ben could see the truth. She was waiting. Watching, afraid. Something had followed her here. Something dark. Ben didn't ask. He had always believed that people told their stories when they were ready. He waited. Until one night the story came. It was quiet outside. The wind had stopped. The fire inside the cabin burned low. Naru sat cross-legged on the floor, mending the same shirt Ben had worn the day he found her. She paused and looked up at him. Her hands stopped moving. "They burned my village," she said softly. Ben looked at her, his eyes steady. "They said we were hiding something. A secret. Something we saw." Her voice was quiet, but strong. "The soldiers came fast, shot my brother, took my father, I ran." Ben said nothing, but his chest felt heavy. "They kill because they can," she added. "Not for law, not for peace, only to hide truth." Ben leaned forward. "What truth?" Naru looked into the fire. "They are not real soldiers. They wear uniforms, but they are hunters. They find land, take it, lie to their chiefs. We saw them kill their own, white men, even women. Then they blamed us. We know too much." Ben's hands tightened. "Captain Brand," she whispered. "That is the man who leads them." Ben nodded slowly. That name, Brand, made the hair on his neck stand up. The man who came to his cabin days ago. The one with the pale eyes and the smile that didn't reach his heart. Now Ben understood. By saving Naru, he hadn't just saved a life. He had stepped into a war. That night, he didn't sleep. He sat by the fire with his rifle in his lap. He wasn't afraid, but he was awake in a new way. He was a man who had lost everything once. He would not lose again. The next morning, he found his north pasture burned. The smoke curled into the blue sky like a message. The black ground stretched across the field like a wound. His winter grass, gone. Ben stood there, his fists clenched. It wasn't just a warning. It was a promise. "We know. We're close. We'll come again." He returned to the cabin. Naru met him at the door. She saw the smoke, her face calm but her eyes full of sorrow. "They will not stop," she said. "I know," Ben replied. That night, Naru said something he didn't expect. "I will go," she whispered. "If I leave, they will not hurt you." Ben stood very still, then he shook his head. "No," he said. "You stay. This is your home now, too." Tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. She looked away. "No one has ever said that to me before," she whispered. Ben stepped closer. He placed his hand over hers. "You're not alone anymore," he said. "Not while I'm breathing." That night they made a plan. Ben showed her how to use the rifle. Naru already knew how to shoot with a bow, but she learned fast. They placed traps near the trails. They blocked the barn doors with thick beams. They filled buckets with water and stacked wood by every window. Ben pulled an old box from under the floor. Inside was a revolver, shiny and untouched for years. He handed it to her. "For protection," he said. Naru looked at the weapon, then at him. "I never wanted to be a fighter," she said, "but I will not run again." Ben nodded. He understood. The next day, they waited. The hills were quiet, but they both knew it was coming. The cabin didn't feel small anymore. It felt like a fort. Their fort. Ben looked at Naru as she tied her long dark hair back. She didn't look like the broken girl he had found in his barn. She looked like a warrior. The knock came at noon. It was sharp, hard, and full of warning, like a gunshot against the quiet door. Ben Sterling stood still. His hand tightened on the rifle. Beside him, Naru froze, the needle in her hand slipping to the floor. Her eyes met, his wide, fearful. Without speaking, Ben motioned toward the back of the cabin. Naru slipped behind the curtain into the small sleeping area, her feet light like wind. He turned and opened the door just a crack. Outside stood 5 men on horses. Dust clung to their boots. Their eyes were sharp and cruel. At the front was Captain Malachi Brand. His pale blue eyes glinted under his hat. His face was clean-shaven, but nothing about him looked kind. "Good afternoon," Brand said. His voice was smooth, but cold. "We're looking for someone. A Comanche woman. Dangerous, maybe hiding nearby." Ben leaned against the doorframe, calm but strong. "Ain't seen no Comanche. Just me and my land." Brand smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. "She's wounded. Couldn't have gotten far." One of the men behind him, a large man with a long scar down his face, spat on the ground. "She's quick, but she'll come out. They always do." Ben's grip on the rifle stayed steady. "You're on my land," he said. "You can look around the hills, but you don't come in my cabin, you don't step in my barn." Brand tilted his head. "A man alone out here, it's a hard life. Dangerous, easy to disappear." Ben didn't flinch. "Try me." A long silence hung between them. Then, with a short nod, Brand turned his horse. "We'll be nearby," he said. "Call out if you see anything." They rode off. Dust rose behind them like smoke. Ben shut the door, locked it, and stepped back into the room. Naru stepped out from behind the curtain. Her face was pale. Her hands shook. "They know," she said softly. Ben nodded. "But they don't know how strong we are." That night, there were no stars, only dark clouds and a heavy silence. Ben and Naru sat by the window. The rifle rested between them. A lantern glowed in the corner. She looked at him. "You don't have to do this," she whispered. "I am only one woman. You could let me go." Ben turned his eyes toward hers. "You are not just anyone. You are Naru, and you matter." Her eyes filled with tears. She turned away, but he gently touched her shoulder. "I lost everything once," he said quietly. "My wife, my boy. I was already dead inside. But then I found you in that barn, and now I feel alive again." She placed her hand over his. "Me too," she whispered. Suddenly a shout came from outside, then the sound of boots hitting the ground. They had come. Ben stood and handed Naru the revolver. She nodded. No fear, only strength. The first man burst through the barn door. Ben took a breath, stepped out onto the porch and fired a warning, shot into the air. "Stop right there," he shouted. The men paused, surprised, but Captain Brand walked forward, eyes cold. "You're hiding her," he said. "Give her up or this ends bad." Ben raised his rifle. "It ends bad for you if you don't turn around." Brand laughed. "You think one old rancher and a wounded squaw can stop us?" A shot rang out from the cabin. One of the men behind Brand cried out and dropped his rifle. Brand turned sharply. Naru stood at the window, calm and unshaken. Ben stepped forward. "We're not alone anymore," he said. "We're together, and we will never kneel to men like you." The men hesitated. Brand snarled, "Fire!" Gunshots echoed across the field. Smoke filled the air. But Ben and Naru fought like one spirit. She covered the windows. He held the porch. Their bullets flew true. It didn't last long. The invaders weren't ready for resistance. 2 men fell. The rest fled. Captain Brand, wounded in the leg, dragged himself back to his horse. He looked back once, his face full of hate. Ben didn't shoot. He just stared. "Don't ever come back," he said. Then, silence. The sun began to rise behind the hills. The sky turned pink and soft. Smoke drifted slowly away. Ben sat on the porch, blood on his sleeve, but alive.